my baby didn't do a lot of movements, never woke me up in the night. I remember the words really clearly that were said to me then, which was, "I'm sorry, Erin, it doesn't look good." Because I can remember everything as if I'm watching a movie.
In this episode of Beyond the Labour Ward, we're going to hear from Erin, who's sharing her pregnancy story of how you can go from joy to utter tragedy in a moment. Let's hear from Gemma's mum. All right, thanks so much for joining us today, Erin, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your version of the story. I know lots of your story, but there's probably more I'm going to learn today. So let's just start with how we first met.
Well, yes, it was back in 2015, if I remember correctly, and I made an appointment to see you for another matter and had some exciting news to share that we had discovered we were pregnant.
So you had a problem with your pap smear, which required some treatment, and we were you came to me for that treatment, but we talked about it, and then you said, well, I'm not sure, you told me that you were pregnant, which was lovely. So I think we did a scan, and did we
I believe we saw a heartbeat that day.
Yeah, we saw a heartbeat,
I do think you told me, and we might have been too early, but really pleased that I think it was about 6 weeks, so it was that timing, and we did. Right,
I'm remembering that now. Okay, so that pregnancy journey, from my memory, was reasonably straightforward. I don't think there's anything that really stood out in my mind.
No, really smooth from my perspective. It was, I think, compared to other stories I've heard, I didn't even get backaches till the very end. So it was, not even much sickness in the first trimester, a little tiredness, which we all hear about. But I think I was really lucky, actually, that it was relatively smooth sailing and everything. I just wanted to see my baby every time I could on the ultrasounds, of course. Yeah,
I used to call them entertainment scans, those scans, just to reassure you what's going on. But
Absolutely.
So things were progressing on well, and then something happened.
It did. So I saw you on a Friday for my regular scan, and I was about 37 weeks. And so as I said, that was a Friday. And then the Monday night following that, I realised that the baby's movements had stopped. That wasn't unusual for me because my placenta was at the front, so anterior placenta. So my baby didn't do a lot of movements, never woke me up in the night, never all those things that I heard other women talk about. It was unusual that the baby didn't make a move when I had my dinner, because usually I got a little bit of a thank you kick. I seem to recall that my last movement was around 7 o'clock on the Monday night when I was having a snack, and I was just impatiently waiting for my husband to get home because I really wanted to have dinner and I was hungry. So I remember that. Then no movement after that. So I went to sleep, didn't feel the baby. In the morning, didn't feel the baby. Went to work, got myself a snack, still didn't feel the baby, and then started to really get concerned at that point because we'd missed a lot of the times that I would have felt.
So what did you do next?
I rang your office. And I think I knew this already, but the right thing to do would ring the hospital. So I was advised to ring the delivery or birthing suite, had a chat, and they said it was okay for me to come in and get checked. So I went directly from the office to the hospital for a check. I was panicking. I thought when I got in the taxi that I may have felt the baby move, but in retrospect, I think it was because I was so far along. It was just feet up in my ribs, and I thought I felt a move. We were optimistic everything was fine, and thought that I'd be home soon to relax. It was my last week at work before I was starting my maternity leave.
Right.
So my husband stayed at work. He was busy. We thought everything would be fine, and I rang my parents and said, "Look, can you meet me there because I'm going to need a lift home?" So I headed to the hospital.
I see the midwife who looked after you that day. I see her all the time. She's now regularly there at the hospital, and she did ask me to say hello to you.
Very special to me.
It was the first time she'd ever encountered this and it was really memorable for her. And she couldn't find a heartbeat.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was, first I went in, sat in the chair,
Yep.
And couldn't find a heartbeat. My parents, nervously sitting there
Yep.
watching, moved into a bed, and they got an ultrasound machine.
Yep. Yep.
And then I remember the words really clearly that were said to me then, which was, "I'm sorry, Erin, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
We're going to call your doctor."
Mm. Yeah, and then I came along, and it was, it's just hard to put into words what, these experiences that you have when somebody who you've known all this long, few months of the journey, you know your story, you know your life, and to be able to tell you that it's over, the baby's gone.
It's not what you imagine happening. Yeah. You know that it can happen, and it had sadly happened to a family member, my auntie and uncle.
Right.
So I knew that it could happen, but you don't want to ever believe it could happen to you.
Do you remember calling your husband?
I didn't call him, actually.
Okay. Mum and
so
Dad,
it's interesting because I can remember everything as if I'm watching a movie.
Right.
I think I really feels like an out of body experience for me. Like I was watching everything happen around me. When I was told that it didn't look good and they were going to call you,
yep.
I just turned to my parents. My mum ran over to me saying she's so sorry this is happening,
yep.
and I just looked at my father and said, "Ring Matt."
Yeah. Yeah.
So he made the call. He didn't tell Matt exactly. Matt knew
yep.
where I was,
yep.
but he just told him to come.
Come in. Yeah. Yeah.
But I do remember
yep.
when Matt walked into that
yeah.
hospital room.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the roller coaster of emotions that go on at that time is difficult to explain until you're in that moment.
Yeah.
And I said it before, but then I'll say it again, it's one of the toughest jobs for an obstetrician to ask you to deliver your dead baby. And the reason we do that is because, it's really easy just to do an operation and remove the baby, but there's something about this process of birthing your baby, even though it's dead, just to kind of say goodbye and to get through that is very emotional for all involved, but there is this element of it just kind of having closure and completeness. What do you remember about that process?
I remember you talking to us about that, and I as I did throughout the whole pregnancy, and I'd always put my faith in you. I knew you wouldn't guide me wrongly. It did feel very overwhelming, and being my first experience too, it's already a little bit scary not knowing what birth is all about. But although this is jumping ahead, I look back and I'm really pleased that I did that, that I was able to. I know that not everyone is able to, that their circumstances aren't going to allow that, but I am pleased I could do that for our daughter, and I am glad I did. I know my mum struggled for a long time and felt it was terrible that I had to do that, and when I realised that was such a big issue for her, I was pleased that I could let her know that I wouldn't change that. Okay. But they're definitely overwhelming thought.
Yeah. And so what do you remember about the day? So I think you went home.
No.
You stayed, did you?
I stayed,
right, okay,
yeah.
Right.
The family all scurried around in the background getting what we needed, but for us, we couldn't wrap a head around leaving and coming back.
Yeah.
So I remember my husband Matt walking in to the room, and that's something that has haunted me for probably ever since, to be honest, because I would explain it to say that I saw the man I love's heartbreak before my eyes, and I don't think a lot of us have seen someone's heartbreak, and just to see that happening.
I guess because you'd had like 20 minutes, half an hour to kind of get yourself in that place, but to see him go through that,
you have to tell him.
Yeah.
I think though I was in denial, if I'm honest, or just not. It's hard to say actually. I knew what I was being told. I heard the words, but perhaps because I still had to go through things. So I know we waited for him, and we went down to get an amniocentesis, and I think prior to that day, if someone mentioned that procedure to me, I would have gone, oh my gosh, that would be so painful, that would be terrible. And I can honestly say I didn't feel a thing. No. I don't think, I felt like I wasn't really present. I remember it all. I can see it all happening again, being wheeled down, how well I was looked after and sensitively sort of handled in the situation. But so well looked after, but there was no, I don't think I'll be the right person to ever ask to explain what that procedure's like, because it was nothing compared to the pain that I was feeling.
Just for those who don't understand, when you have a baby that dies, sometimes we can get some information from the amniotic fluid that can help explain why the baby died. And so an amniocentesis is where they put a needle into the uterus to take a bit of fluid away. Often it's used to check the chromosomes on a baby to see if there's risks of that. But your situation was just to help us, give us some information for the future. It's, you know, I take my hat off to those ultrasound staff. You know, they just are so wonderful there. But to be able to treat you in a loving way when you're at this peak of grief,
they were lovely. And I still remember obviously having to do their job and do the procedure properly and have those conversations with you to do it. But I do remember them saying, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. I remember that being acknowledged, which meant a great deal to us as well.
So then we had started the process of delivery. I think might have an epidural, I think.
I did eventually. My original birth plan, aside from firstly putting my trust in the professionals to guide me with whatever would occur, my original birth plan was to try to see if I could do it without any pain relief. I did try. I didn't. I guess being my first time as well, I assumed that contractions came and went. I've since learned that when you're induced, that's not always the experience, and it certainly wasn't the experience that I was having. I tried to endure that, and then I remembered I had a few phone calls that day with some close friends that we'd shared the news, and I remember one of my very close friends was pleaded with me on the phone many hours earlier to please take the pain relief I was going through, too much pain anyway. And I listened to her, but I was still adamant at that time that I wasn't going to. I was going to try not to do it, but yes, I did.
And I think it was a good thing to do.
I think so too. Because I look back and I think we were able to welcome our daughter and start our goodbyes around such peace and love. And not that there's anything wrong with the alternative, but it meant a lot that during the process that I'm glad I did make that decision.
I just think about sometimes the partner being with you at that time. We should interview Matt, maybe sometime I should do that. But, you know, there's all this grief, you're going through difficulty, it can be really hard for them.
Absolutely.
Because they can't do anything to make it better for you. And I think that's going to be really challenging.
Oh, 100%. And he is like a lot of our men, and not to stereotype, but they see themselves as the protector. They want to look after, what can I do? And he was and has always been amazing. Yet he lost his baby too that day, and continues to be without her. And both in those moments and since then, a lot of the attention does go to me.
And our whole medical system's geared up for looking after you. And often we don't have support for the husband. There is starting to come out now. There are some groups that are coming out now. Panda's one of them, which supports the husband. And but it's a thing to dwell on.
And they need different sorts of support too. We're built differently. And for him, he had some amazing mates, and just simply, they checked in on him regularly, and he could step away and had some conversations with them, which meant a lot. And just being able to be with his mates and his football at the time was a great outlet for him that worked for him.
So now, when she was born, what do you remember of that moment?
A few things. I remember saying to you, I thought that maybe it wasn't true. And I remember you saying, as I said, I can see it. Like I can still. It's been 8 years, and I can still play it like a movie. And I remember you saying, I'd hoped so too. And I think obviously we all knew that it wasn't, but it became ever so more real at that point. I would, and there's a beautiful picture taken by the wonderful midwife that was assisting at that point in time for the birth. There was a wonderful photo that I think captures this other sort of feeling that we had, and it was one of absolute devastation, but absolute pride in the beautiful daughter that we had created. And that's what I can see in this particular photo, but it's how I remember feeling as well. We'd never, this was our first child. We had never, it's amazing to have created a little baby, and she was perfect.
She was so perfect. And tell us what you understand as the reason for her not surviving.
Yes, and I remember, my husband will talk about how he saw you and our midwife that was there exchange a look at the time that you felt like you had worked out what had happened as well. So our daughter Gemma, that we met that day, had a cord accident. Yeah. So, and when I tell people that, they often think that it was around the neck, which I've since learned can be dangerous, but isn't they're not breathing through their mouth at the time. No. It's all about, from what my understanding, how compressed that cord that is providing what they need in the womb. And for our Gemma, the cord had wrapped around her body and then wrapped around her left ankle very tightly many times. I do have, I think my husband saw it more clearly from where he was placed, but I do remember having to unwind that cord so she could go on my chest as we had discussed we would still do, and which I'm so pleased. She was just so warm and beautiful. Yeah. But that cord even left a mark on her.
There was an indent on her. I remember that. And I mean, the thing about is that the cord gets in all sorts of places, and I've delivered babies where the cord's been around the neck 4 times and never had an issue, and but there've been very few occasions when it's actually been a problem like this, and it was nice to see a reason, but it was not nice to see that reason. Agreed.
It felt like there was nothing we could have done. I've said to people, like, she was doing somersaults and dancing in there, and she just got herself all tangled up and couldn't untangle. And I would love to know her story with that, how long it was like that. And obviously she grew and moved and so on. But yes, I'm grateful there's a reason, because I know that there are so many other families that have had our experience and don't have a reason. But it also felt like a reason that there was very little I could do to stop it happening again. Yeah. Which obviously brought a great deal of fear to future pregnancies.
Well, we're going to start talking about that soon. But so she's now born. She's on you. You're having cuddle. What did you do to remember her?
So many things, and still so many things. So we had my parents were there, and my husband's mum had been able to fly in that night. She arrived a little bit later, and my brothers and their partners were all in the hospital at the time, but before I had her, and then got to meet her after. And they stepped in and organised and did their research to organise our way of creating memories. So we had a company come in that took her hand and foot mould.
Yes, all right.
And they came in that night, I think it was around 10:30 at night. Obviously not the service they would normally do, but that they do in these circumstances. So we had a hand and foot mould made, and we have one beautifully framed with a photo of her at home. And then we have another set that they did for us that we can just pick up and hold, that's not sort of framed whenever we want to. We had...
They do both hands and both feet, or just do one of each?
In Gemma's case, they just did one of each because some of her skin was a little bit damaged, so they didn't want to do that. But we did that. Our midwife took footprints for us to keep and put them on a lovely card that we have. And we had Heartfelt come in and took some amazing photos, which we took many photos. Our midwife took amazing black and white photos through the birth that are just, we were oblivious to her doing it. Knew she was going to do it, and we're happy for her to do them. Oblivious to the process, given we're going through. But the photos are beautiful memories that she took, and then Heartfelt came in and took gorgeous photos of Gemma on her own and with us and with our family. So.
And now that it's 8 years down the track, how often would you come across these photos, or how often would you?
All around our home.
Oh yeah.
So I think, as I said, we took a lot of our own photos, which we treasure, but they're not photos that others are as comfortable to see.
Sure, of course,
but these beautiful photos that Heartfelt took, people do find them easier to look at, and they are our daughter.
And she's your daughter.
She is our daughter.
That's
and
right.
her photos are around our home with our other children. When we have a family photo, her photo is always held by someone in the family in that family photo. I won't call it a family photo unless she's in it.
Right.
We try to include her as much as we can and speak her name as much as we can.
So then you've had this pregnancy loss, and then you were hoping to fall pregnant again, and then, well, let's just see what was the next step for you.
Well, first we had to deal with the issue that had me coming to see you the very first time, which was not ideal, but we had to have a procedure for that. Yeah. And then I wanted to fall pregnant again as soon as possible. It felt strange because I felt like we were forever changed. We were parents but without a child, and we couldn't go back to what we were before we'd had Gemma. Yet we had no child in our arms to care for, and it was a really strange space to be. And I had this deep fear because I was a little bit older, and we did take a while to conceive Gemma. I had this deep fear that we would be parents without children forever. Yeah.
Now, I believe there's a particular psychologist down at one of the private hospitals who has a real interest in helping support people through this. And you've met a number of other ladies who've had similar sort of pregnancy losses.
That's right. So I did, there was a few places I went to support me through what was going to happen immediately after losing Gemma and then ongoing years. So I did see a psychologist who does specialise in many things, but including those that have lost their children. I also joined a wonderful bereaved parent support group. And met people that I still keep in contact today. And it felt, where it helped was that it was really hard to go. It was hard to go out of the house at the time, to be honest. I found socially I was, and still to this day, I'm not socially what I was beforehand. Right. But going and meeting people that have lived the same experience than you, albeit with slightly different stories, of course, you didn't feel like you had to try to explain or felt like they didn't understand. They just simply did. You knew that they did, and there was a lot of comfort in being around that group. And I was in the bereaved parents group, and then subsequent pregnancy after loss, and then when we had our children get-togethers, that we would talk about how we're feeling and what was troubling us, and just be together. It didn't always have to be about our deep feelings. We just were around people that understood.
I think that sort of community that you get yourself into to support you when you need those needs, that's quite the way to put it, but it really does help you when you meet other people who just have gone through it. So
you feel like you've been forced to join a club that you didn't ask to join.
Correct,
and wouldn't ever wish it upon your... I don't actually have enemies, but it's someone that you didn't dislike. You'd never wish anyone to go through this experience. It's just it's not fair. It's not the way it's meant to be.
Okay, so now you're trying to fall pregnant. Suddenly, I often say this to some of my patients, but when your first pregnancy, it's because you love each other and you had this beautiful thing happen. Now you're basically having intercourse because you want to fall pregnant, and that can be really taxing.
It's very stressful.
Yeah.
It's very stressful, yes, definitely. And I am jumping ahead with this statement, but we're pleased to be past that stage now, that's for sure.
Good answer.
It's nice to, and being, so I was 36 when Gemma was born and we lost her. So time hadn't run out, but I also knew that I couldn't take the time that I may have otherwise been able to do if I'd lost her earlier in my age. You know, felt like I couldn't just sit and wait around, and felt like I was ready to embark if I ever was going to be on another pregnancy. So, you know, we were definitely wanted to be parents with a baby in our arm. It felt like we'd had our time. It wasn't fair that we weren't there already, and it felt like such a journey to start again. It felt like forever, but it was, I can realise now it was only 7 months after we lost Gemma that I felt pregnant again, but it did absolutely feel like 7 years.
I do remember lots of
phone calls,
phone calls, text messages, you know.
I was stressed.
yeah. And look, I think that's normal. I can't think of a single person who's been through anything like this that haven't had that same experience.
Yeah.
And so essentially a lot of anxiety during that pregnancy.
Absolutely, and with no medical reason, thank goodness, but also no medical reason we could fix and solve to make sure it didn't happen again. So I definitely had a love-hate relationship with the umbilical cord. I knew it was critical, but gee, I didn't like it very much because of what it did to our girl. But yeah, a lot of anxiety. I felt I didn't announce that I was pregnant. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't tell anyone about it till until I had to, until they could really see it. Close people, obviously.
I can refer to that to as emotional defences. You've got your emotional defences up there, so you don't.
Didn't want to believe.
You don't want to believe you're pregnant until it's until you got a baby in your arms.
We obviously had stuff because we had some critical items because we were 37 weeks and 2 days when we lost Gemma. So of course, and it was our first baby, and we. Even though I knew bad things could happen, I also had the naivety of pregnancy that I didn't really believe it would happen to me. So we did purchase, we did get organised. So we did have some things, but it wasn't until very late on that I allowed myself to purchase an item, because with Gemma we didn't ask to find out what we were having, but we did for our next child because we felt that we were happy regardless, of course. But if it was another girl, we needed to prepare ourselves that wasn't going to be Gemma. If it wasn't another girl, we needed to know. We just needed. We told no one else though. That was for us. But it was a hard pregnancy, and it wasn't emotionally. Physically, the game was fine. I feel fortunate enough that physically my pregnancies were fine.
Very straightforward,
But people would ask you, they can see your belly after a while, and I just wanted to hide. I didn't want to celebrate and talk about it till I had a baby in my arms that was alive and well.
Talk me through the moment of, you had a nice normal birth for your second. Bringing that baby up onto you, what emotions did you have at that moment?
I think it didn't even really hit me that we did it. It was, as you said, it was both of my girls, Gemma as well, Gemma and our daughter that we had next. Easy labours really, and I think I was amazed. I couldn't really believe that we got her there, and I had done no planning and thinking about how I'd care for this baby. Once it was born, I realised later. I just was.
It's such a hurdle to get over.
I just had to get her here. And that was. That was something I tried to fix the next time. But just trying to get her here and in our arms. So, just amazing. And there's a picture. There's a beautiful picture of my husband and I looking at each other and smiling, and he definitely had all the emotions on his face to believe that she was here. And I feel a bit nervous for talking this because Matt's not here, but he really struggled. He did,
And that I was not expecting that. He really struggled, I think. It took him quite some time to sort of come to terms with the whole thing about being a dad and having lost a baby, and now I've got a baby, and I should feel so much joy, but I feel a range of other emotions.
And he spent all that time stressfully. He never showed any stress, but it would have been very stressful trying to stop me stressing. And towards the end, we were off to the hospital for checks all the time, and because I was worried about moving. I had another anterior placenta, of course. I just, and I remember him saying, and when we called our daughter Amber, I remember him saying, and when she would cry, it just tore him up. And I know none of us like to see our children upset, but we also do know babies cry a lot. That's their only way to communicate. And for him, we're in the hospital, and I'm sure it was a whole lot of emotions coming to a head for him that we finally got her here. And this time, you know, she's here and she's safe and she's okay. And he was really struggling with he just wanted to protect and look after her, and seeing her cry.
It broke him.
It really did. It really did.
But, you know, he got there.
He did.
Yeah, we're all
doing
proud
great.
of him. That's right. He's super dad. So, okay, and then what happened next?
Well, I would say before we get to more babies, I would say that I was a very anxious and nervous mother to our daughter Amber.
Oh, okay.
I really struggled. I felt like, now I'm a bit of a stressy person anyway, definitely a worrier. But I felt like any little thing would have catastrophic circumstances.
Right.
If she was a little bit too cold, if she was a little bit too hot, if she didn't want to drink all of her milk, if she didn't, anything I felt like would be catastrophic. And I did need a lot of support and did receive a lot of support, and I look back and go, I was really a mess during that time. She's doing great. She's now 6.5, older than that actually, and doing great. Funnily enough, a little anxious one as well, but that's probably just my fault, taking after her mum. But it was, I didn't put a lot of preparation into how I was going to care, and now I had her here, I didn't want anything to happen to her, and I know everyone feels that way about their children, of course, but I just felt like the littlest thing would mean she would be taken away. Wow. So that was tough. But we weren't done with having children.
Okay.
And again, I was older, so how old was I then? I think I was 37 at that point. So about when Amber was about a year old, we thought, well, look, you know, we'd ideally like a couple of years gap, but we don't know how this process is going to go, so let's try for another one. We felt really strongly that we didn't want Amber to grow up without a living sibling.
Yeah.
If we could possibly help that. We also felt strongly that she'll grow up knowing about her sister, but we felt that would also be really tough for her to have a sister that she couldn't see and she couldn't play with. So we really wanted her to have a living sibling as well. We didn't anticipate how hard that was going to be.
Yeah, this was another journey to go on.
Another journey.
If you haven't been through enough.
Yes,
you know?
It definitely didn't seem fair.
Yeah. Because you had a number of miscarriages. Yeah. Yes,
I had 3, and these are the ones that actually were seen on ultrasounds. I had many in our time of conceiving where I saw a disappearing positive pregnancy test. But they were very, very early, really cruel, to be honest, when you get to see that line and have it disappear, because I would take 100 tests in a row. It's the only way I could see the pregnancy at that point. But after Amber, trying for our 3rd child, we had 3 first trimester miscarriages. I lost all of those babies in around a 12-month period as well. So we were falling pregnant quite easily, but we weren't able to hold them. So I really started to fear that a living sibling for Amber wasn't going to happen, as my 40th birthday also is getting closer. Yeah. They were terrible. Just absolutely devastating. I think the first miscarriage was devastating, but I also it didn't make it better, but I thought, well, you know, I know that this happens to a lot of women, and this is one. Let's try again. But as they kept happening, it just felt like it was not going to happen for us.
Yeah. And I think you might have even looked down the road of possibly undergoing IVF.
We did. I wanted to give it everything we had, and we did talk to you about that and got a referral and had a first appointment. In the end, Matt felt really strongly not to do it. He does understand his triggers, definitely, and they're different to mine, of course. We're different people, but for him, he felt, we didn't have trouble getting pregnant, And the purpose of us doing IVF would be to test the embryos. And this is me trying to explain it, but you might have to translate some of this.
You give me your version, okay?
The idea for us to do it would be to test the embryos to then try to implant the ones that we didn't have a chromosomal abnormality, that would have the better chance.
So that explains it pretty
well. Screen out. Because that we do know for 2 of the miscarriages, you were able to do some testing and we understood that was the cause.
Yeah. So the most common cause for a miscarriage is some sort of chromosomal or genetic issues. Even though you and Matt are normal, and you have normal chromosomes, sometimes when the egg and the sperm join together, there's about 400 billion things that have to join correctly, but something doesn't quite join right. And the pregnancy starts, and then they realise something's wrong. This is my simple way of thinking of it, and then it stops. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's just genetics, and about probably 80-90% of miscarriages happen for that reason. And the idea with the IVF is the complicated process where they can actually test the chromosomes on the little embryo. You got to wait an extra month or so, and then they can work out which embryos have got normal chromosomes, which ones have got abnormal ones. And that can be a really good technology for people who've got some genetic issues that they want to make sure that the child doesn't have. But that
for Matt, the sticking point was we understood that's why we would be doing it. But when we had our first conversation, they were explaining to us that you've got a certain days in the process that you need to get to a certain point by a certain day to be able to do the testing.
Yes.
Before you have to freeze them, etc.
Yes,
Like I said, it's not this. It's the certain point you have to get to, and it was explained to us then, especially because we were older. Sometimes it can be a perfectly healthy embryo and it would work, but for the process of for the purposes of doing the testing, it might not get to the point it needs to get to.
Correct. Yeah.
And Matt just simply said to me, if that could happen to us, and if it did, I would be angry.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, because the way we have approached this whole process, and with the way we both continue to address our grief with losing our daughter, we respect each other's boundaries and our triggers, and also allow each other to do what we feel is important to us, like being here today to talk to you. Yeah. And I said to him, okay, I understand. So I want to do 1 more year of trying. At this point, I just turned 40. We'd had a 6 months off which felt really strange because I was coming out to my 40th birthday, yet we took 6 months off trying for a baby. It just didn't quite, but we needed it.
Yep.
And I said, okay, we won't do IVF, but I want 1 more year, and if it doesn't happen, then we need to move on. We've had mostly heartbreak in our journey to create our family, and it will be time to move on, and he agreed. So that's what we decided to do. And to jump ahead, it was middle of the year, about 6 months into that we fell pregnant with our son.
Yeah. I'm just remembering you coming in for that. And again, there was joy, but there was also this anxiety again, which I can't imagine, having been through what you do, that I wouldn't be anxious as well. I would be.
It was terrible. As I said, not physically, but emotionally, just terrible. And I just wanted to. I didn't mind being pregnant in the sense that I loved, the few times I could feel my babies, and I had anterior placentas the whole way through, which just was cruel.
Cruel.
I just thought, surely it's obviously how my body needed to work, but it was terrible, and I just getting to that end game, and even then I did make it to the date we decided, but I did go in early for that one as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, when you've had a loss at within 100 metres of the finish line, you kind of want to make the race 100 metres shorter.
Exactly, and we could.
Yes.
Even though we shouldn't, it wasn't recommended, the fact that we could meant that it was really hard to get past that point. And
so I think you were induced early, around 37
around the 37 week mark for all of them.
For all of our emotional well-being. And I guess I feel like, from my memory of your situation, you and Matt are a little bit better prepared for that early parenting time. And
absolutely.
Yeah, really.
My son did give me more grief birthing him.
Yes.
That's for sure. He didn't give me the nice smoother run. that the girls did, and oddly it felt a whole kilo heavier than his sisters, even though he was the same gestation. So I think he is still a big boy. Wow. But I had put more time, as well as being incredibly anxious about, I just didn't believe that it was a sure thing. I didn't like talk like that. I didn't do the other talk, I just didn't do the talk. About it.
Didn't talk at all.
Just didn't do it.
This is during the pregnancy.
I mean, I would obviously have some conversations about it, and I was definitely excited, and we did decide our names, and I also knew that it was going to upset me if we lost our baby in the first trimester or at the very end. It's still our baby that we lost, and the minute you see that positive pregnancy test, you start imagining. I tried to pretend I wasn't, but I absolutely was imagining our life with this baby, but I just didn't like to have too much talk about the future. But I also had a little baby girl at home, not so much a baby anymore, that I needed to prepare for being a big sister as well. So we had to put some things.
And so, what's his name again?
Jesse.
So Amber and Jesse have a relationship with their older sister.
They do, and it's evolving. It's been interesting to see. So Amber is, she'll be 7 in June.
Right.
So getting closer to 7 in year 1 at school now. And for a long time, we just talked about Gemma, just matter-of-factly. We have Gemma, we used to have her urn at home, we have a beautiful spot, and we have her photos around the house, and we would just say, that's Gemma, that's your big sister. And she would say, that's a Gemma, and that's Gemma. The way we would talk about her is that we have her in our hearts, and we see her in the butterflies. And our daughter Amber, since she's been able to speak, really sees a butterfly and she goes, hi Gemma, and waves, or Mum, I saw Gemma today, or hi Gemma. She'll stop and her friends will go, oh hi Gemma, and just copy. So that's how we've spoken about it. Just more recent times, Amber has been asking a lot more questions. I know that Gemma is dead, but I didn't use that word a lot. But that's what she does. So she goes, why did Gemma die? She's been asking me questions about that. She's been saying, I want Gemma back as our little baby. I said, well, she's actually older than you if she was here, and I want it back. I just say, I wish that we could have her back as well.
It's interesting that you've got a child who was born after, but she's having grief.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'll tell Matt, these stories will happen all the time, these conversations, but most often they're not at bedtime. And I'll tell Matt about it after, and he would just be, I'm so glad she's having those conversations with you, because I find them hard, but he finds that harder. He thinks of her all the time. He remembers her. We do things to celebrate her, but we also have different boundaries with that. So I'm getting a lot of questions, and she now will say, oh, Gemma's dead, and told a teacher the other day, it's my sister Gemma's birthday, but she's dead, so I get to blow out the candles. It's very harsh.
Brutal children's interpretation of things.
But I've also know enough to know that they are matter of fact, and I have to be very straightforward with my language, which I might not like the language. We have, for her birthday, we didn't used to do birthday cakes, but the kids think a birthday means cake. They want cake, they want to blow out the candles, they want to sing. So now for the last couple of years, I've done that, because I do know that by talking about Gemma and wanting and being insistent that she's considered part of our family forever, that I have to allow them to remember their sister their own way. And for our youngest, Jesse, he just turned 3. He's really at the stage where he looks at a family photo and he'll point out that that's Gemma. He knows her name, and that's about where he's at, and he enjoyed blowing out candles, but we haven't gotten to the questions. But he might not be the deep thinker that his sister is, so we'll find out.
Maybe his sister will word him up and get him all.
Maybe I'll be relieved that a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story today. I brought up a whole bunch of emotions in me that I had forgotten about, and just really valued your time, so thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to do it. I'm surprised I could keep mine in. They were hanging out there behind the eyes for a little bit. But I enjoy talking about my family. And I always appreciate what you did for our family to help us get there.
Great.